Okay, I think it's time to start. Any questions, doubt that raised during the coffee so far? Or you had a good coffee and that's you were not bothered by stupid thinking. Okay, so just to restart from where we were, I remember, we looked at the models, how to inform models, and then we looked at, and now we're looking at how to actually use these models, because we have fantastic models that are useless so far. Okay, so I like to show them how can we use the models in a way to predict faults. Now, we already mentioned that the point is that it's reasonable, it's easy to recognize something that we've seen in the past. We don't need a model. Okay, well, you may need a model. Let's say, if you have the complete set of traces, having a good model is only a matter of time, because of course, if the model is complex enough, it's easy to actually find out. So let's say if you have a finite state machine, it's fairly easy to see whether the traces that you're actually feeding in incrementally, which is the execution, is recognized or not by the finite state machine. If you have the whole set of 2 billion traces that you've been in the last 2 years, it's a bit more difficult to find out whether it belongs to that set. But apart from that, that's the only point. The key issue is you can also, it's not that difficult just to see that you cannot recognize the sequence. The problem is, what do you do with that information? I mentioned before the coffee that we had this very interesting point that in our system, first example, Tomcat, we actually have been experiencing only exceptions because basically, we were using different IPs every time we actually run the system. And this happens much more often than I can say. Another great experience we had with case studies is Joda time. Do you know Joda time? It's a very nice library that basically computes time in millions of different calendars. It's very nice because you show later also it's very redundant. So basically the idea is you can pick up your favorite calendar. Is it Christian, or is it the Western, or is it the Muslim, or is it the Hebrew, or is it, and you would not imagine how many calendars are around. I think they have more than 100 calendars. Okay, and then you start running the system, and it tells you a lot of things. So of course, it depends on the timing you actually run. So if you run twice, even if it's exactly the same execution of the same machine, the timing of the conversion, it's different. So if you say, what time is it for? What day is it in the today? But today changes, because tomorrow is not today anymore. And these simple changes would actually make exceptional every single behavior, and we experienced that many times. The other problem is that the failures. Now the picture here is not very good, but okay. This is a very, very rough architecture of Tomcat. There are several components that are the 4 components. We in Tomcat 600 to 609, they have this fault, which was in the way in Catalina, which was one of the components. Now, in the picture is bad because it looks close to the red stuff. No, it was randomly positioned in the system and in the execution, and we had a problem. There was a problem. The problem with me communicating of Tomcat with one of the applications we were using. So the problem is that the problem and the location of the fault were completely randomly related. It's not easy relation to do. So the question is, can we actually move from knowing that one of the web applications is interacting in a bad way, anomalous, getting the point that it is not simple numbers, but it's a real failure, or a failure, and knowing that the failure is in Catalina. That's not the easy part. So, what do we do? Okay, you capture the correct behavior, you trace the failure execution, and then you locate the faulty component. And the first thing you do is you monitor. It's the obvious thing. So you look at to a point that your execution stays within the range of the build model, you are happy. You should not, because it may be actually, but you're reasonably happy. Let's say you're safer than if it's not, basically. Okay, and then what you do is you have, these are actually the real anomalies that we found out. in the trace you found that there is anomalies in, actually the fault was actually at some point that there was, the Tomcat was not able to reload an application to a specific combination of codes. So you find out that there is an anomalous behavior, that there is a second anomaly, the third anomaly, the fourth anomaly. So basically there are several anomalies and then a fault. Okay. So the first problem is to actually eliminate the spurious anomalies, because as you know, if the anomalies is, oh, we have a new IP address, who cares? Okay. So we need to eliminate those. Now, the easy way, and it's actually a very good filter, is you can eliminate everything which is actually that happens both during the successful and the failing execution. So you look at only what is different, not all the execution as itself. And then you rearrange the executions according to the likely cause effect. How you do that? Well, we get a dynamic call tree, okay, which tells you what has been called when, and you rearrange the anomalies according to the distance in the dynamic call tree. So it's easy, you get an anomaly graph, which is the nice little bubble up there. Each square is actually a node, each node is an anomaly, and each arc is a relation between the anomalies, which is, of course, a complete graph, because since it's a tree, you can always compute the distance between two nodes in the tree. So that picture, it's not just a simple picture, it's the anomaly graph that we detected from the anomalous execution of Tomcat. So, any idea which is the relation? I have a larger picture, so maybe I can give you, if you want to actually think about how to locate, which are the group, which are the anomalies. So, basically, to build an anomaly graph, we simply build the graph and then compute the distance, okay? And we got to this one, okay? Now, what's Eclipse actually? Sorry, it was another example. Now, which are the relevant relations between among nodes, and then which are the nodes that are relevant? Of course, we have sometimes in formula, but not enough yet. Okay, so the idea is the following: is to actually cluster anomalies and get a sequence of clusters. Okay. Now, how do we cluster anomalies? The solution seems easy, but it took us a long time. So the idea is the following: you start removing nodes with the highest weight. So you start removing the nodes that are more likely to raise, good relations, and you basically you measure the cohesion of the single resulting graphs. And so what you do is you start removing nodes, and you actually partition the graph. And then what you do, you basically stop. When you stop, basically you stop when there is the biggest, because basically you always reduce the cohesion of the graph. So at some point you get a separate graph. So basically on one side you have the big bubble, useless. On the other side you have the single nodes with no connections, useless. Now, how we stop? Basically, we notice that whenever you actually remove, whenever you reach, okay, those points are whenever you get yet another disconnected component. So you start with the big bubble, you remove one edge, second edge, third edge, fourth edge. We can actually look at, but there is depending on the weight of the edges, you basically remove the edges. At some point, the graph obviously get partitioned in two or more subgraphs. Okay, so that's the first point. Then you start again, and you get the first, second, third. Then start again and get the. And then at some point, you actually notice that you get all the sequence. It's not difficult to find because it's just a matter of age. It's the number of edges removing the other. So it's not that big. And then you get to the point that you notice there is one single point, which is the most sharp change in the shape of this decrease. So you basically decide to stop heuristically when you actually, because you start falling down, let's say, fairly down, and at some point you actually get much less steep. And you don't know when, but you can compute. And then what you do is basically, in that graph, that single red spot is exactly that sequence of graphs. And that sequence of graphs tells you that there are very few connected graphs at that point. And very few nodes. Now, luckily enough, what we have is that, push a bit too fast. Luckily enough is that these nodes are exactly the nodes that correspond to the cluster of faulty statements in Eclipse. So you remember, I told you, I started with the known fault. Run the execution, plotted some points, some anomalies, and now I found out that is there any possible location. So what we do is basically we try to locate the problem, filter out only the anomalies, compute the relation between the anomalies, to end the cluster problem, and then we get to the point where we actually say, okay, this is a reasonable cluster, and why it actually corresponds to the fault. Answer number one, because we tried with millions of faults, we ended up with one that worked, and we picked up that one for the paper. No, there is a rationale for that. Okay, let me actually explain the rationale, and then we go on with the next step. Okay, I should go back a moment. Okay, let's go back one more. What we do is we start with the initial anomaly graph. Right? The refining is remove nodes with highest weight. How do we build the weight? The weight is the distance in the core graph. So, what it means distance 1? Next to previous. So basically it means there were 2 consecutive anomalies. What it means distant 2? There was something in between. Distant 3, there was something more in between. Distant 200, there was anything more in between. Now, if there is one thing that we have noticed, we didn't consider that possible, but it did happen, and this is the following thing. If you actually get one spurious behavior which is not a failure. Let me go back. I'm sorry, I'm just browsing up and down. Maybe it's because it's late now for me. But I go back to this one. Remember, I told you I want to actually distinguish between the 3 points. Okay. Now, the red spot, top center, top left. Okay, the one which is yellow blue destination. This is my new IP. I have a new IP. Okay, so when I assign the IP first, I have an anomalous behavior. Stop. The only anomaly is new IP, and then everything works as before, because the key issue is if I take this exact machine and I move to another row, I change only the projector, it should behave the same. Now, we know it's not true, but in principle, by changing only the IP, everything you expect to behave the same. And yeah, that's what you experience. So in that case, the anomaly is isolated. What happens if you actually get a division by 0? Now, it's not the greatest example, but I think it helps to understand. So if I use a new IP, I notice that now I assign a new IP, and then I open the connection, send the messages, wait for the ACK, send another message, wait for the ACK, close the connection. So the only anomalous behavior is new IP. Now, I have a division by 0, oh, I move to the exception handler, oh, I move to another exception handler, oh, the system crashes. So I have a sequence of anomalies. So what we do, and that's the reason why it works, is to distinguish between the red spot on the top left and the top right. So anomalous but legal, anomalous but illegal. We want to do something like that. If we look at the distance, and then we get the whole graph. 2 nodes, maybe close or maybe far, but there is one edge that says how far they are. I remove the single highest weighted edge. What it means? I disconnect the 2 anomalies that have happened far away. in that execution. Because it's likely to be isolated, you know. That's likely to be random, you know. I change IP, and then I do a lot of things, and then I actually change also the color of the screen, and I have another anomalous. But, you know, they are, you know, likely acceptable. And I started removing, at some point I disconnect, and I try to disconnect. So basically, the end up of the result is this one. This is a cluster of very close anomalies, very close together. And these are isolated, or almost isolated anomalies. So it's not that it happens because we are lucky. It happens because anytime you have a failure, you're very likely to have not just one single deviation, but a cluster of deviations. And so by stopping when you actually have, and you know, stopping criteria have been tricky, but I think it took us a while to understand. We couldn't find a magic number, basically. But you know, that actually, you know, and you know, I don't have the labels here, but it actually lists all the exact components that are involved in the fault.
But the component might not be unique, because they can have the same.
Absolutely, that's not unique, by the way, because these are anomalies. Anomalies are not located to a single component, but it's in the trace, and the distance is on the core graph. So you know, well, honestly, we have not working with any distributed systems yet. But you know, in that case, you know, it can be actually it is that some of these nodes belong to Catalina and some other nodes belong to another component in. No, sorry, it's not. It's not this graph because this is Eclipse, but they do belong to 2 or 3 different nodes that are involved in the bad behavior. Okay. End of part 2. So in part 2, I try to focus on the models, on the monitoring, and on the fault localization. Okay. Now I want to go and go ahead and look at reliability, redundancy, and self-healing. So I really want to actually show you a possible way to heal software systems. Now, if you look at the way you heal software systems, you heal systems in general, I have a claim that will pop up soon in my slides, which is the one that I started with. Okay? Why Michael was wrong, or was too pessimistic? Because we often do save information or knowledge that you cannot use completely now, but we may be able to use in the future, and sometimes we use exception handlers. Okay. Any other example? No, because there are 2 possibilities. One, for the last 60 years, people were not clever enough, and only the guy with exception handler decided to make use of that, or it's actually something that has happened before. Okay, at this point in my class, I ask, how many wheels do you have in a car? 5. Okay, now, not anymore, but once upon a time we had 5 wheels in the car, the 4 wheels per the spare wheel. Okay, this is redundant information or knowledge that you use when something that is unexpected is happening. So redundancy is the way people guarantee reliability in general. Okay, how many replicas of a system of a datum you have in Google, in Hadoop actually? You know that in Hadoop there is no unique data. Okay, are you familiar with Hadoop? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea is you replicate the data. Oh, to fast access, yes, but you get reliability for free. You know how many bits for the same memory location you have in the RAID disk? Do you know what RAID stands for? Mm-hmm. Redundant. Yes. So, how many algorithms you have on your space shuttle for computing critical computations? Are you familiar with, I'm not saying that you're avionic engineers, but are you familiar with the way the software is built on, or the regulations called, it's called EO 178C now. used to be A and B, now it's C. Are you familiar with that regulation? You know, it's classic fault tolerance. You know, actually all flying spatial vehicles, special vehicles with human on board, you must have 9 copies of the system. You know, in the worst case, you have 3 copies. And you know, Clem will actually go in for a bit probabilistic theory, and you'll know better than me, I'm sure you know. The idea is if you have a good, well-designed system whose probability of failure is 1%, if you have 3 of them, what is the probability that the 3 of them will fail at the same time? It's 1% to the cube, so it's much less. Okay. So the idea, in one sense, is redundancy is there. So a system is redundant. What does it mean? It means that it can do the same thing in different ways. Okay. So basically, you get the same functionality in different implementations. And okay, I mentioned that RAID, redundant array of independent links. This is hardware redundancy, is done for protecting you from the hardware problems. In this case, are actually manufacturing problems in a better way. So RAID does not prevent, does not save you from design defects. It saves you from manufacturing defects. So it's a classic dust little thing that happens to be in the production actually with this one. Oh, by the way, if you're familiar, how often you think this technology is critical? For example, just quick question. Do you know how often you have a bit flip phenomenon? So do you know what a bit flip phenomenon is? Bit flip is when the bit changes from 0 to 1 or 0, 1 to 0 independently, which is a problem. Do you know how often you can get it? Because I was shocked actually. I thought, come on. My vision of hardware is you open, you close, there is no way it actually changes, Now, I was told that, for example, there is an area in the southern hemisphere where the bit flip is so frequent on satellites that it's getting a real problem. So the same software that flies well on satellites on the northern hemisphere does not fly straight away on the southern hemisphere. There are some areas where the sound radiations are so strong, probably because the ozone hole, that actually reduce the ability of the. So you get, even this bit flip phenomenon, as a frequent phenomenon. And my friend who is working in hardware design of bit flipping is saying that at the level of miniaturization that you have on computers, also the interaction between, I don't know how it happens, but the speed, the movement, so you get it on the cards as well. So the idea, it's happening more and more often to have it on the cards. So, I'm not an expert of that, but this is that kind of phenomenon. Not design, it's not a bad design, it's simply some interference. Data redundancy, this is a fairly simple example of the Hadoop distributed file system where each data is replicated more than once. Safety critical, when space shuttle example, where you actually have replicated inversion programming, recovery blocks, you can go. Basically, we did actually make a lot of studies, and we noticed that in the past, not only in engineering, when you recover for something, or you actually sort of avoid the major problems, so minimize the effect, is by reusing some redundancy. So redundancy is some of the information that you bring with you at runtime. Okay? Now, in software you have a lot of redundancy. You have redundancy at the level of the code, so you have the code, you have the invariants, you have the contracts, you have the models, you have the assertion. So everything says the same thing. You say the same thing. Now, the key issue is that which redundancy to use and how to use it. Now, so far, we actually have been seeing what I call added by design, deliberate redundancy. Deliberate redundancy is the redundancy which is added by design. What does it mean added by design? It means that if you go to a reliability engineer, okay, and they want to work on the nuclear plants, you want to work on the aircraft software, okay, how much does the software cost? Oh, at least 10 times more than writing the website. Okay, can't you reduce it? No, you can't. If you have to actually, it's not just a matter of reliability of the single component. If you have to actually have at least 3 replicas of independently designed, it's because, careful, you know, in a shuttle it's not that you actually compile 3 times the software, because then yes, you have a coincidental correctness, because they either go all together or they fail together. Because it's not a production problem. If you want to overcome a design problem, I get, she should actually write my software, he should have my software, and he should have my software, and then independently put them on the same, on the different machines, and then the possibility that they fail is less likely. It's not that unlikely, by the way, that they fail together. There are studies on that, but it's less likely. But in that costs 3, 4, 5 times more to build the system. Now, go downstairs here and tell the guy who sells software for the internet that he can actually get his platform much more reliable to multiply by 3 the cost of his system. Nobody will do that. So we are looking at another kind of redundancy, which is basically intrinsic redundancy. Now let me quickly show you what does it mean redundancy, execution, and version programming. In a version programming, you have the code, one version of the code, and you have the execution space. You execute once, and you go from one point in the space, execution space, to the second point. You get a second version, you execute twice, and you get to one point to another. Third version, you execute. Now, the key issue is whether, you know, if these executions, these points are the same, you actually accept that that's correct. Otherwise, you actually will fail. In specifications, basically, you have a specification, and the specification tells you, you know, specifies what it's supposed to do. So you can actually connect the specification with the code. Again, you get information about the correctness of the code. In assertions are evaluated through the execution of the code. Now, what we are looking at is something that goes beyond that. Again, why I spent so much time telling you how to get models from the system execution automatically instead of starting from the specifications? Because writing specification is difficult and expensive. Writing assertions or replicas is difficult and expensive. Okay, assuming they can do that. So, what I'd like to do now is to actually tell you what I mean by intrinsic redundancy, show that it exists, and show how can we use it for getting software more reliable. Okay, so this is my favorite job at time. I mentioned that before. Okay, and this is a method in Java, in Java time that actually computes the beginning of the day. Okay. Oh, but there is another method that is actually in another class that actually computes the beginning of the day. Oh, there is another method that actually computes the beginning of the day. Okay. So basically, we are looking at redundancy at the method level. This is another example. Java. You can actually check whether an element is in a multiset by calling method contains of the multiset. Or you can actually call method count and compare the results. You actually do 2 operations. Or you can actually call contains on the elements of the set. So again, you have redundancy. Okay, now I like to actually explain you what do I mean by redundancy, and then why is there so. Redundant means it's different. Okay, this is the actual code of the put and the put all method in Google Java. A few versions. There is no single common structure, but they do the same thing. Because if you call put with an element A, and if you call put all with a set that contains A, you get exactly the same result. If you call 5 times put with A, B, C, D, E, and then you call put all with a set A, B, C, D, you get exactly the same result. Okay, so they are equivalent because they give you the same expected or same visual experience behavior, but they are not equal. Okay. Now, the inequality is important because you remember we actually talked about end-version programming. You have replicas of the same program. You actually rely on independent design. So if you get, if put all calls put, it doesn't happen. Okay. So, question: how often do we actually get redundancy? Because you can think, put and put all, give us examples. This is a new study around, one SVT times, hundreds of classes, we got thousands, so an average between 6 and 15% of equivalent method in single class, which means it's quite a common phenomenon. I must confess that I was surprised by these numbers. And so the question is, can we capture intrinsic redundancy? Okay, and yes, we can do that in this way. We use what we call rewriting rules. What are rewriting rules? Basically, put is equivalent to put all. Contains, multi-map is equivalent to contains map elements. Okay, basically, so what we can do is we can code this redundancy by looking at the API, looking at the specification, and decide when and under which condition methods are equivalent. Okay. Now,
just one question. So the identification of the pieces of software that represent redundancy cannot be done automatically?
They can.
Oh, okay.
Next half an hour. No, that's a great question. Actually. Yes, of course. So let me clarify the question. So maybe I wake you up again and see. No, sorry. I like to spend. So I'm going step by step. So let me actually maybe recall the things. Step number one. I believe, and we believe, because that to get some ability of doing something at runtime that we cannot be done before at design time, we need some form of information that is inherited at runtime and is used at runtime. So we need two things. One, information, knowledge. Two, the way to exploit it. Second point that we're actually trying to make clear is that this kind of information can be put in many different forms. The most common form that I've seen so far is some sort of redundancy. Basically, you write something or code, you have something that does something that is already done in other ways. Even if you actually write an exception, you write something that should not happen. You serve something that should not be there. So there is a sort of additional information that is redundant with respect to it. The form of redundancy is that you have something which does the same thing in different ways. So far, people have been using this in a way which is, I do it offline, write specification and use specification online. I didn't show that to you, but it's actually there are many examples. Inversion programming, write an version of the code, Hadoop, duplicate the data. Okay, this is great, works well. We can build, we as a humanity, not me. We can build software, reliable software for nuclear power plants, and we are very happy with that. We can build fly-by-wire aircraft, and we are very happy with that. We cannot build drive-by-wire cars yet, but we are enthusiastic about that. But that's another story. Okay. But the question is, this is a form of redundancy that costs, and is not applicable in general. So self-healing and looking at general code. And so the next step is, I actually say, okay, software is redundant. So far I didn't tell you how, I gave you this information about what does it mean, and it happens to be very frequent, actually. Okay, now the next step is exactly that, how we can actually capture redundancy, how can we exploit redundancy. Now, for the moment, capturing redundancy is completely inexpensive. You get a good PhD student, and you work for a few months, and you get the redundancy. That's what we did, actually. So our first inexpensive way of identifying redundancy was to have a good and patient PhD student scavenging through the code for many months. And in fact, when I show you some data later, you say, we know that we have 300 redundant methods in this code, and we found automatically 250. How do we compute the 300? Of course, by that. So, for the moment, I would claim, and I have claimed in my past papers, that basically even even manual inspection to identify redundancy is not that expensive as the failure, that we can argue. But I come to the point that I show you how to generate automatically redundancy. Okay, so question number one, I want to tell you why software is redundant. First is design for usability. This is at this level.